Hey, folks. So this episode is about the Glass Cannon podcast, specifically episodes 12 and 13. That's Tread Lightly and Hold Your Breath. For the uninitiated, the Glass Cannon podcast is an actual play. Currently, they are playing Shadowdark. They have a network that has a bunch of actual plays from a bunch of different RPGs, but their flagship show is currently on their 14th episode at the time of recording of Shadowdark. And so we thought, given that our show is about looking at, well, usually our games, in this case, someone else's game, and analyzing it and kind of unpacking some of the stuff that happened, we thought it might be interesting to look at a couple of major events from those two episodes. So, if you haven't checked out the Glass Cannon podcast yet, both Jody and I think that you should. We recommend it. Actual plays aren't necessarily for everybody, but this one's pretty awesome, and we hope you enjoy our analysis of episodes 12 and 13. Let's do it! There's my Joe impression. You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG.
Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games and podcasts where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss Shadowdark and the Glass Cannon podcast. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Jody, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Matt. How the heck are you on this rainy afternoon?
Oh, it's a great day to record, Jody. It's a great day to also to listen to other people's recordings
and then talk about that, and then record those for other people to listen. It's a Mobius strip of sound.
We are part of the dead internet theory.
All right. Today's episode focuses on our thoughts about the Glass Cannon podcast and their ongoing actual play Shadowdark campaign. So, Matt, won't you take us to their table?
Indeed, I will, Jody. And so I'm going to keep this nice and short and sweet. The Glass Cannon Network, who I've been a fan of for quite some time, I would shout out many of their shows. And we'll probably do so at the end of the episode, but want to keep it really focused on Shadowdark. They've been playing Shadowdark for about 14 sessions at the time of recording and as we record. Up here at the top, what I want to do is just give some context for folks who maybe haven't listened and why are we talking about an actual play show. So this is an actual play which features a GM and 4 players, and each of those 4 players are playing each of the 4 individual core classes. And they're playing in the Gloaming, the Cursed Scroll 1 setting. They're doing it. They've been hex crawling around. They've been exploring the place. And what's cool about this is that the Shadowdark community, especially the Discord, has really rallied around the campaign. There's folks watching every single week. It is live streamed, and everyone kind of gets together in the Discord, watches together, talks about it. Kelsey's sometimes there. It's been a great rallying thing for the community. And we're going to talk about a couple of episodes here with the express purpose of doing what we normally do, of talking about being a GM, playing Shadowdark. But from the top, just to give everyone a sense of what is going on, I wanted to outline their house rules, because that is something that, Jody, you and I have really honed in on as being important to understanding the context of people's games, is how did you tweak the system? What game are you looking for? And so I'm going to run down the house rules, and then we can hop into our discussion. So here we go. The Glass Cannon podcast is using the following house rules. They are using most prominently a kind of sort of version of the pulp mode rules, especially as they relate to luck. So everybody gets a luck token at the beginning of the session. A handful of episodes in, started to limit that to 3 luck tokens, what they call bottle caps, to 3 per player. They also have implemented, you can chain those rerolls using luck. So luck works the same way it would in the core rulebook, but you can chain those luck rolls. So if you fail a roll, you can spend a luck token on it. If you fail again, you can spend another luck token on it. You can also spend a luck token to give the GM disadvantage prior to their roll, or after you roll, you can turn a hit into a crit by spending a luck token. In addition, they have a spell loss house rule. This is the same one that when Sly Flourish came on that he kind of corrected me on correctly because I mischaracterized it a little bit. But essentially, you can't lose a spell until you have successfully cast it once that day. So you can still fail, and the spell doesn't go off, but if you haven't been able to successfully cast it, you don't lose it entirely. It requires a rest to reset this rule. And then in addition to that, they took max HP at level 1. So some stuff here to contextualize during our discussion, but really felt like it was important for folks who maybe haven't tuned in to get some amount of context for what these folks are doing. And you can kind of tell from these house rules that they are angling for a long-form campaign, something where these characters are going to persist and not die and get churned through immediately. But I think there's some interesting things to talk about here, Jody, so let us take a break, and we'll come back, and let's get into it.
All righty, let's gather round the fire and talk a little bit about Glass Cannon Network and their playing of Shadowdark. And I think right off the top, it's important to answer this question, Matt. Chickens or bees? Chickens or bees? Chickens or bees? Which is it?
Chickens or bees.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, so
sorry.
This is a classic Troy LaValle bant from the beginning of one of these two episodes. I believe it was episode 13 that we're going to talk about. I'm a chickens guy. I know that everyone on the program chose bees. I'm a chickens guy, but I am but in this way, I don't want chickens. I want to know some people with chickens. I have always found that knowing people, it's like you don't want to own a boat. You want to know somebody who owns a boat.
It's the best way to experience a boat.
I find the same thing to be true for chickens. You get all their extra eggs, but you don't have to do any of the dirty work messing with those dinosaurs.
There it is. Why I started with chickens or bees, one, it just tickled me in a way that their intro often does. I find that I genuinely will find myself laughing at the show while listening, which is pretty rare. Not that I'm a hard laugh. I'm easy to get laughing, but the fact that I am sitting alone listening and will laugh ha-ha out loud at something that's pretty unusual. The other thing is it is an actual play podcast, and couple of things I wanted to address here right off the top. One, there will be some spoilers as we go through this. We'll try and, ease off the gas about spoiling, but we're going to be talking specifically about episodes 12 and 13 in some detail with the intent of going, hey, Troy, the GM of the show, made some calls. How did those land for us? And when we think about our experience with Shadowdark, how are we processing that? And then the other thing is, again, contextualizing what they're doing. They're an actual play. There is I dare say, requirement that the show be entertaining to listen to. There are, without wanting to throw any shade, but there are a number of actual plays out there on YouTube and other places that you can go watch people play. And it is very much like if you sat down in somebody's garage or basement and watched them play. Actually, it's not very engaging. It's very weird to watch. And there is an amount with the Glass Cannon of pushing the desire for entertainment and keeping it enjoyable. And chickens or bees was a nonsensical way to do that. And so I want to dive in, Matt. Let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Right off the top. And I think it's fair to say you and I are both fans, both really enjoying it. This is new for me. Glass Cannon's totally new for me.
Yeah.
Until they were playing Shadowdark, I don't know that I was aware of them at all. So I was like, oh, okay, cool, neat. I am enjoying this far more than any other actual play I've watched because to me, it gets closer to people actually playing than many actual plays do. See aforementioned examples of literally it's like cameras on somebody in their garage. One of the things that really jumps out to me that episode 12 begins with two excellent examples. There is a dwarven statue and then a werewolf. We're going to have to spoil that. A werewolf that they engage with. And Troy's dialogue to me is exceptional for both of those moments of the statue speaks to the party and has a clearly scripted monologue to get through. And then later the woman, before she becomes the werewolf, also has a very similar series of narrative beats that I'm assuming Troy had written out in advance. Your voice acting as a GM is quite good for a home game. I think of anybody I've played with. I think yours is about as good as anybody's. I'm mostly just pimping the show here of like the voice acting quality on Troy's part. And it's not really voice acting. It's just scripted dialogue for NPCs is outstanding. And of course the players embody their characters probably more, as we refer to it on the show. That theater kid energy is present. I don't know. This isn't so much a like, let's make the call as GMs, but just again, kind of contextualizing it as an actual play. I think this part kind of has to be acknowledged before we get into the nuts and boltsy stuff.
Yeah. So I want to call out, this is a great call, but I want to call out something very specific, which is that Troy actually reminds me that you don't have to do accents. You don't actually have to change your voice very much to do accents. Like, and this is true of like anyone who wants to embody a character, even if it's just, I love the kind of quick setup where you set up a scene where like the players come into a shop and all you want to do is you just want to give it a little bit of flavor. And so you speak maybe a sentence in that NPC's voice. You don't actually have to do that much. You can affect a different way of speaking. And Troy does this very well, either by lowering his voice, quickening his voice, slowing things down. He has a very good sense of how to use his voice in ways that don't require him to like do a Scottish accent for a dwarf, like, which is sort of this kind of tired accent, right? I mean, it's not, but it is. But he manages, I think, to kind of thread the needle in one particular way, and of course you can compare that with lots of GMs who do actual plays, Matt Mercer, etc. I think there are others who go more into the voices and less into the voices. But I think this is something that a lot of GMs struggle with, is like, I want to get better at doing voices. And to me, the absolute best way to do this is to find GMs who don't have a bunch of accents in their back pocket. And also, I'll just plug in here, I think I've said this before on the show, I don't know, listening to audiobooks is just like outstanding, because the way that good audiobook narrators narrate characters in the book by affecting very slight tonal or kind of changes in their voice, that is also just a great way to embody characters. So I think the dialogue is exceptional. I think it's interesting. I don't write out dialogue in our home games. Like I ad-lib all of it. I don't know. Do you write out dialogue?
That was going to be my follow-up question. Is there's no way the dwarven speech in particular, that was not off the cuff. There were too many very specific nuggets that had to be hit. Depending on what it is, I will write out occasionally a like, hey, I know this NPC has to deliver all of this information, and maybe there's like 4 quest hooks because sandbox style, thing that I do. I'm like, I want to reference these 4 other possible quest hooks. I don't want to forget one. So I'm going to write, if not a script, then at least a bulleted list of things so I don't forget. One of my favorite screw ups in recent history of GMing was this very elaborate camp scene and this whole thing. And there was an investigation, and it was orcs that they were tracking. And I literally never through the entire scene ever said, these are clearly orcs camps. And they were like, oh, and like the party left, and it was the next time we got together, and they were like, and then we found those like bandit camps and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I never said the word orc for 2 hours, and they assumed I would have told them that. And oh no, crap. And so to avoid doing that, I will script things occasionally, not just every session by any stretch, but in this episode, there are these 2 very long kind of scenes of, and necessarily so. This isn't like, hey, look at me be the GM and be cool. That's, in fact, wildly, I think, a testament to Troy's GMing is he doesn't take the scene unnecessarily, which actually gets me to the next thing. And I know this one, when I was watching, I was like, I wonder if this is making Matt's skin crawl. So in the episode, Sydney, who plays Saint, said, hey, we got to pull aside for a second because they have a bunch of NPCs with them that they're rescuing. And they stepped aside as players. Their players in game kind of walked, 10 feet away and were huddled up and had a talk.
Down in this dungeon, like underneath the lake. They're like, you go stand over there in the dark.
Yeah. NPCs, go stand in the corner. We need to talk. Yeah. Probably not about you. And there was a lot of above table kind of conversation about how funny that would be of like, go stand over there. We're going to talk about this.
Right.
Now, in real time, and they edit their show, like they clearly clean it up and tidy it up for presentation, as they should. That debate goes on for about 10 minutes. I went and checked, and it's about 10 minutes of the players talking amongst themselves about what they might do next, which they had already kind of decided they would be doing, to go full loop from we're going to go into this place to do this thing. And then they have a 10-minute conversation to get all the way back to that point.
Yeah.
So it's 10 minutes of planning without ever building a plan, but talking about what we might do and what that might mean, which I know for Matt, the player, is not your favorite. And as a GM, something you are very careful of, something that I will let spin when I'm GMing. I'll just be like, hey, if players are talking about that, go for it, you guys. Like, unless it really gets egregious or starts spinning into, we're going to go start, making Neapolitan ice cream, maybe. I'm like, okay.
Or starting a lumber company.
I was not going to go there. It was a reasonable thing to think. Yeah, unless it gets wildly off track, I won't jump in. I'll just let them go. And I mean, I don't care how long it takes. But I wondered if that scene bounced off you, or if you noticed it when you were listening, that like, this is literally 10 minutes of them talking about what might happen.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple things to say. By the way, we didn't really share our notes. So you presenting me, I'm thinking about this in real time. Here's my take is there's a fine line between good planning and bad planning. And I'll try and articulate what I see as the kind of interesting type of planning first. So the interesting type of planning that is what I would call strategic planning, where you're talking about like goals that you have and how you're going to achieve them. Like in this game, they are trying to do a number of things simultaneously. The first is they're in this moment, they're talking about, do they continue to try and save these children who they previously saved, cured of lycanthropy through a session and a half, 2 sessions, and then
2 awesome sessions, by the way.
Sessions. And then they were stolen away while they liberated this other sort of quest line. These NPCs, they liberated from a cult kind of village. So I think there's a lot to talk about there. I don't want to get sidetracked. I think talking about whether or not it is the time to continue to try and pursue your goal, like, do we rescue these kids given our current HP totals, our current spells, our current rations, etc. That is interesting. What I find very often not useful and not particularly interesting is what I would refer to in this context as tactical planning, meaning we're going to run in and you are going to attack and try and restrain this person. Then I will run up to them and I will hit them with my sword because I'll have advantage. And then after that, when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of what is going to happen on each and every person's turn, my biggest problem with that is that every single thing that I just described would likely require a die roll in 5th edition, Shadowdark, in almost any game. And that bothers me only because as soon as a die is rolled, almost certainly one of those things very early in that plan will go wrong and the plan will be out the window. And to me, that kind of planning is only interesting insofar as it gets everyone on the same page about what the vibe is. And as soon as you start really kind of trying to unpack those tactical plans, to me, it falls apart. And so that is when I see there being a horizon. There's a point at which that conversation is no longer useful because we need to get to the dice. We know everyone knows what the goal is. Everyone knows kind of what the deal is. Like, you're going to run in, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Okay, good. All right, let's see what the dice have to say. That's where I'm at. I like the strategic planning. Like, I like the how many rations, etc. I don't like the super nitty gritty stuff that is like, dude, a single die roll could completely upend this plan, and then we're gonna do what we were gonna do anyways, which was try and think on our feet. So why don't we create a very basic plan and then see what the dice have to say?
Yeah, one of my favorites that I laugh at when I'm GMing and then cringe at and try to figure out a way to get around when I'm a player is the let's plan for the next room when we don't know what's in the next room. That one, we were pretty sure this is in the next room because we heard a scratching sound.
Yeah.
And you'll ask the GM like 4 times, like, what could you describe it? It's like a low scratching, like it could be a rat or something, or maybe it's a chair moved. Oh, okay. So we're going to do it. And you open the door and it's like, no, a rat scurries away. That's all it was, you guys. Like, we just spent a half an hour doing that. So what's interesting is this scene actually bugged me a little bit, and it's falling, as I understand it, into the category you're talking about of like, should we continue to press? Do we have enough rations? Because that was the tone, is how far into this cave
I have here written as one more room, ?
Right, and that's where they land at, which is useful if they agree we're going to go one more room, which as a GM is lovely because the players have told you we're only willing to go so far. So if you have like 5 more rooms planned after this, you might need to do some quantum stuff if you buy in on that and go, nope, we're deleting those rooms because I don't want them to miss this opportunity just because they were tired of going. What I found kind of weird about this whole discussion, and having been both as a player and GM in these, is the stakes hadn't changed. Nothing had changed as I saw it. And clearly for players, maybe something had. But to me, we were at the exact same stakes we were when we first entered the cave with the goal of finding these kids.
Well, they had fought some stingbats.
Right. We fought, which is, we could do a whole episode on that, and I don't want to. But yeah, like I was like, as for the players, like the stakes haven't changed. So why are we having a really long conversation about stakes that haven't changed? Other than, like you said, they'd fought something, which is like, man, if you went in a cave in the ground, you were like, we probably won't have to fight anything. That's a very strange bet to make in a D20 fantasy game.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a question about this. How much of so they're doing all this theater of the mind, which I love. Their map, their hex map, their like overland map is not theater of the mind. It's a lovely colored version of the CS1 gloaming map. It's wonderful. And their Foundry implementation is lovely, and it works great for them and for the viewers. But this underground scene, which I think we'll get to in episode 13, is all theater of the mind. And I want to ask you, like, do you think that complicates these kinds of plans? Because to me, I don't think you need a one-to-one representation. I know we've gone back and forth about our desire for that in our own games. But I do think that like some visual representation of like where you are can help contextualize, like knowing how far you are from the exit. Like if you need to run, how many rounds is it going to take for you to get to the exit? Would be nice to know. More on that later. And perhaps not every table actually needs that. But I do think that more information about the context in which the characters are in might have helped here to make them more confident in their choice one way or another.
I think it would have, and they are in a weird nebulous space with this dwarven statue that talks to them. Extremely cool use of one of your favorites, Magic Mouth. But even Matthew at one point says, wait, I need to understand the scene better. How many exits are there? And to be fair as a listener, like other than the statue and like some dwarven architecture, I have no sense of what that room they were in looks like. And I definitely think that exacerbated the issue. I think something you and I both as players have started doing a lot of is not necessarily mapping 5-foot square maps as we're playing, not as we're GMing, but as players, but making just hub style maps of totally. Like, oh, this room takes us to this room has this many exits, and my note pages are littered with those, some of which are now looking back, I'm like, I should have labeled where that was because I don't know what those bubbles are referencing, but that one has 3 exits and we only used one of them.
Yeah, I'm thinking about one in particular that if I can find, I might scan and upload because it is totally incomprehensible in almost every way.
However, in those moments, they are incredibly useful.
Yeah.
And yet definitely more on the mapping of things. Yeah, the theater of the mind has caused on multiple occasions for me. it feels like a dedication to theater of the mind in a way that I find at times can be detrimental. I'm taken back to my childhood when we played largely theater of the mind. One of my GMs was passionately theater of the mind, and there are very predictable issues you run into, just like when you're using miniatures. There's very predictable issues you'll run into. Both ways have benefits and flaws. Yeah, this one of the debating, I don't know if this debate was so much about not having a map, but there was, I mean, literally, like, again, Matthew, who plays Ellison, literally just went, hey, are there other exits out of this room? And, which means that room was not well defined no matter what system was being used. Ultimately, they do press forward and they find the big bad, though. They find this werewolf.
Oh, yeah.
And again, an amazing dialogue, a great example of just volume control by Troy, of this like increasing volume and intensity of voice, not a changed voice. The great thing with like, you always want your villain to be the villain and also to go, but I get what they're doing. Like, yeah. I some empathy for the villain. Heath Ledger's Joker is always kind of held up as the, like, he made the Joker make sense, which is crazy.
Yeah.
There's how it made sense. So they begin fighting, and they don't have magic weapons. They don't have silver weapons. They go on reasonable assumptions versus werewolf. We need magic and silver other than magic missile. They begin fighting, and the point I wanted to talk about in the fight is Sydney, who is playing Saint, their thief, initiates what is, I think, generally referred to as the coin slot attack.
Generally referred to in the now infamous, I think you've maybe coined the term.
Oh, I can't take credit, but I love that you did that. So Sydney runs up, and Sydney's good at lateral thinking, which as a thief player,
I think I'm going to go on record here. I think she, across the board of all four players, has been the quickest to understand what this like OSR adjacent, whatever you want to call it, style is in terms of what is expected of players, and pushing the limit of it at times, which she does here. I just want to call, I think that if you want an example of like a player who's just really leaning into that lateral thinking, yeah, Sydney is doing it, I think, the best of anyone at the table.
Right. She is understanding how to ask for more and
or
not
just
having
like thinking about like, who thinks to use silver? Like, describe what's going on here. Okay. I don't want to get it. Yeah.
So Sydney decides, I'm going to charge at the werewolf, and I don't have any silver, but we've made assumptions, some that have been accurate and some that have not, which is its own little funny joke for Sydney to be saying. And if I stab the werewolf and then were to pull the dagger out and shove coins into the wound, would that, much like and she doesn't phrase it this way, but I think of like a poison or something, exacerbate that effect and allow for damage to be caused? Could that be done? Wow. Wow. Like, what a cool idea. And also, wow, physics exist. That's Jody, the GM, going like, oh man. So that's the coin slot attack, is I'm going to run up to this werewolf, stab the werewolf, and jab silver coins into the wound. Matt, go. So much there of like, yeah. Oh, wow. How's that going to get? DMD, we think about games.
Yeah.
You're the dungeon master. Your player says this. What do we do?
That's a great, I mean, I think what really kind of sealed the deal was the natural 20. I would not have allowed this insofar as I don't think that shoving coins into a wound is going to be enough. I think if you want it, like, to me, the whole point of silvered weapons, the whole point of magical weapons is a silvered weapon to me isn't just a piece of silver. It is a nearly magical implement. However, I can see if a player in this moment rolled a natural 20, I can see allowing it once. Just because that sort of confirms to me that, you achieve the thing at the maximum possible effect, and maybe I would not have it do any damage, but I would have it do something else. So to me, there's an opening here only because there's a critical success. and I would allow for it on a critical success, but this is one of those kinds of, you know, calls that on a different day I might say something different. I think in the context of the game, specifically in the context of Troy being awarding XP at a very slow rate, I would say, that balancing it with a more kind of player-centric methodology of adjudication makes sense. Like, I would have given an XP for this. I'll also say that. Because it was cool thinking, you rolled a natural 20, it worked great. That's an XP in my world. What I think is interesting is that in a game in which XP is being rolled out and doled out very, very slowly, I don't really see a problem in terms of like giving the characters the benefit of the doubt. So I think as a gestalt, it's interesting to look at like maybe in a context in which I was running a game where I wanted to keep the players at a very low level for a long period of time. Maybe then I would actually be a little bit more likely to err on the side of the player.
I think if you're thinking about they're using some riff on pulp mode, this is a very pulp thing.
That's a good point.
It does make also for, well, it's not that, I literally hadn't thought that until you just made your argument. So you're maybe swaying me a little bit. Is also, you know, it is an actual play, and we ideally a new character every week who dis, not super engaging. Like that's a lot for an audience to keep track of. So I think there has been clearly a handful of times that, you know, to my eye, Troy has let off the gas. Not always, but there have been instances where I'm like, well, we pulled off the gas. More on that in a minute. This actually is my only genuine, I would do things differently critique, which is, you know, annoyingly what we're doing here a little bit.
Yeah.
Is, you know, somebody has put themselves out in public and we're going, well, actually what I do. So I want to be clear before I say what I'm about to say that I think this is great. I've enjoyed it. I'm excited for more. The one thing Troy is doing that genuinely grates on me a little bit, and this is a great example of why, is he never tells them what they need to roll for. There's no calling of DCs. There's the Shadowdark standard DCs. Yeah. My player says, hey, I want to try this. Can I? My inclination is to go, yes, you can. And here are the rolls you would need to make to achieve this. There are multiple steps here. You're going to have to succeed at multiple things, one of which is going to be extremely difficult. If you don't succeed at all of them, then you won't succeed at all of them. If you do, then what would we like the effect to be on the other side? And per an old episode of ours, you know, let's make a deal. Let's talk about what effect you want this to have. Do you want your dagger strike now causes damage? Do you want maybe for one round, the werewolf is like open to being damaged because they have silver in them? And you could set the terms of the test.
Right.
And this was such a like, I don't know, let's just roll and see where we go, that as a player, I find that a little bit unsettling because I can't make an informed choice. I'm just going, I'm just flailing at this thing. And, you know, there's obviously a table culture here of yes and. I think in a most recent episode, or one of these episodes, we're going to talk about Joe, who plays Warwick, the half-orc fighter, calls out that to Troy is like, you can see Troy is trying to say yes to something. It might even be this moment of like, you can see that like there's a yes and is wanting to keep that intentionality. So this was a very cool moment. I think it's neat. I don't think I would have offhand said no, but also I would have set terms of like, no, the inserting of the coins is going to be an extreme check. Like it's going to be an extreme DC to do that because it is extremely difficult. And it would have been gated behind not only an attack roll, but then a secondary roll on one turn, which is, again, that's very idiosyncratic to my style of GMing, of going, I'm all perfectly fine with that. And if you roll a nat 20, then all the things go out the window anyway. So yeah, just a really interesting and cool scene. And, you know, any one of us listening, speaking, or on the show, you could call this a different way. But I thought it was an interesting scene to talk about. How would you adjudicate that moment that the player says, I want to do this crazy thing?
Those are all great points. And I don't want to belabor this werewolf situation with the coins just because it's one instance of a gameplay, but I think it's just so emblematic of the kinds of things that we're asked to make calls about as GMs. And, player creativity meets maybe the kind of fiction of the world, and how do you adjudicate all that? The thing that I want to kind of transition to, Jody, is that the episode ends with the players kind of breaking the will of this werewolf. They get the children. They are getting out. And I believe like somebody goes down. There's the cure wounds is lost. So Pharaoh, Skid's character, can no longer cast this. It was either at the end of this episode, the beginning of the next one. Long story short, it ends on what is in Glass Cannon culture called a Cliffy. And I just wanted to say that I like this. I like ending sessions on cliffhangers. It is also very precarious because in terms of home games, where especially if it's in terms of a home game where you always returning to town and certain an open table game or something, you can't do this. But if it's an ongoing game with a set group of players, it's kind of high stakes because you end up sort of having to pick up sometimes in media res, and if you don't have a session relatively quickly, the cliffhanger loses all you lose all the momentum. And this has happened to me a few times where we've ended on a cliffhanger and then we've had to cancel a session and then move a session, and suddenly we're a month and a half away from this, and then I'm like, oh crap, we have to pick up in this extremely intense moment and no one remembers what's going on. So I like it. I do them in our games, especially my weekly 5th edition game. I'll look for places to kind of, but I know that Troy is always looking for the Cliffy, for the cliffhanger, and I just think it's always interesting to analyze how you get there. You have talked to me about this, that you, I don't know, that pacing is something you want to work on, and I see looking for the end of the session and finding a way for the end of your session time limit to somehow coordinate with the end of a cool moment. That's a very hard thing to do. I don't know. What do you think about when you're trying to end a session? Do you ever do this?
Oh, absolutely. And it's, as you said, something I've been really trying to work on. And I found the magic bullet, silver bullet, one might say, is that I'm willing to give up part of my session. That's the weird thing that I had to come to terms with.
You can end early.
We're going to play from 1 o'clock to 4:30 or 5 o'clock. And then at 4:15, I'm kind of all right, we're starting to, plane's got to land. And then 15 minutes later, it's this is a great ending spot. All right. And we'll come back next week. And players are wait, we got another half an hour. And it's yeah. But I know what the next half an hour looks like. It's not as exciting as right now. And it's very strange for me to be willing to give up, up to a half an hour of game time.
That's a lot. That is more than I would be willing to do. So.
Well, we've done a lot of playing with my current campaign group of what is our window of time. We have a player who travels a fair distance to come and play. So want to respect that she has enough time to get on the road and safely get home without having to drive through the night. And when we start, and what does that mean for food? And it's a very, flexible thing. So I am right now, our session end is 4:30, which seems very weird. So it's noon to 4:30. And then there's this nebulous kind of half an hour on either side to 4:45, 4:50. All of that was not the point. That's my game. Is
no, it's all interesting.
Looking for this cliffhanger is rad. And again, for an actual play, heck yeah, you want to do it. So every week people keep coming back and coming back and coming back. That's what we're all agreeing the thing to do here is. And this one was very exciting because not only did the party get the kids, start exiting, had the NPCs running away, they're fighting the werewolf. Joe as Warwick, their fighter, is I'm going to do this heroic last stand and shield the thing. And then the cave starts collapsing and there's water spraying in, a la every great Indiana Jones scene. And then the werewolf, as it's collapsing, like holds a chunk of the ceiling as it's about to cave in on them and delivers this super cool line that they're all like, whoa. And then they run into this collapsing cavern to make their escape. Man, did I go, why is Troy letting them go? For me, there was no reason for the werewolf to make this sacrifice. And this was an instance of like, oh, we're letting off the gas. Now, I also didn't know at the moment it happened that what's ahead of them is pretty gnarly. And then that's what's ahead of them. So we moved to episode 13, and the party, as they're escaping, is running through this underground cavern. We talked about mapping a little bit. They're a little unclear about where they're running to. And the cavern is collapsing and flooding as they're running away. And this is
Jody,
the overwhelming majority.
I have thoughts about this.
I'm sure we both do, and I don't even know if they align at all. I know, though, because you nearly drowned one of my characters not too long back, and we talked about it on the show.
I nearly drowned all the characters.
You did nearly drown all of the characters, but, mine should have died then. Little did I know his timer was already fixed. His needle had been fixed in time. Yeah, Matt, dive in. Where do you want to go with this collapsing, flooding cavern, runaway, escape? Oh, my God, that's cool and exciting.
All right, I got a couple of things I want to kind of set up here. So I see the end of episode 12, the werewolf fight basically ending, and episode 13 transitioning into what I would say is a different style of episode. So I saw Troy, and I don't know if this is the case, but I'm going to kind of project a little bit. I saw Troy thinking about this like a television show where you, and he has said on numerous occasions that is one of the ways, film and television is one of the ways that this group thinks about actual plays. That's why their episodes are about an hour of gameplay, is they are very episodic, right? You have a role-playing episode, you have a combat episode. This is kind of how they used to run their Pathfinder games. They would generally follow this kind of pattern of role-playing episode, combat episode, role-playing episode, and they would deviate a little bit every so often. However, I thought the collapsing, flooding cavern was... It was not my favorite way to adjudicate things, and you're not going to be surprised to know why, which is it starts off with Troy saying, you guys are going to need to make a save, basically, and he says the word save, which, like, if I was being a pedantic nonsense person, I would say, there are no saves in Shadowdark. But from my perspective as a GM, what I immediately saw was, this is a skill challenge or something akin to a skill challenge. All the players are going to choose a stat that they want to make a save or a stat check with, and success will confer moving forward, and failure will confer some kind of setback. And to me, that is not the way that Shadowdark works mechanically. And I wanted to get your sense of like how you felt about this. I've done this before. You've done this before in a game of Shadowdark. I left the times that I've done this kind of feeling unsuccessful in doing what I wanted to do. I also thought that this seriously was hindered by the lack of transparent DCs. So to give you an on-ramp here, they are attempting to get out of this cavern. They are still in initiative order. Thank goodness, because I think that really helped. But on each of the GM turns, the NPCs have a turn, and also there's an environmental hazard that confers a check on everyone who is still in the caverns. And the DCs, I couldn't quite figure out upon re-listening a couple of times what the DCs were. I think one of them was like 14.
And one was a 17. One was confirmed at a 17 at some point, which I went like, okay.
And
sure.
So there's a lot to unpack here. And I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about this whole thing. There's a number of things that you have written down here that I can see that are all kind of contained within this. But I want to talk about the procedure first.
Yeah, it just got muddy, and I don't mean because of the water and
Yeah.
the cave. It
Yeah.
was such a cool idea, which Joe calls out multiple times of like how cool this is. And like they're all clearly into it, of the mental picture of our heroes running through this cavern and water spraying at them and the water levels rising and the NPCs are ahead of us and are injured and the things caving in. And like, yeah, who doesn't want to play that scene? And then mechanically, it just is listening to a group try and figure out what the hell's going on their turns. And, you know, I think at one point Troy says something to the effect, and this is a thing I'm super guilty of like, I'm trying to stay in the moment and not talk about mechanics. And then I think it's, again, Joe says something to the effect of like, well, let's be clear about what's going on here. It's like in life and death. And this is a moment where I am learning, and I think I've grown a ton in my own practice. And this is not a critique of Troy, but of this moment where it was like, you need to stop. Everybody feels the tension. Everybody's clear on the stakes.
Right.
And go, okay, here's what's ahead of us and how this is going to work. You have this far to get. It's going to take this many rounds. These are the challenges in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
How are you navigating that? The environmental challenge piece of it, that there was a thing you had to make a test on the GM's turn. I don't know. I'm a mixed bag. Like, I don't know that I've specifically ever handled that in that way. I think usually I go, hey, on your turn that will require rolls because of the environment, not on my turn you're going to make a roll. And I think where it kind of spiraled, that I think we both agree on, and I'm the guy who loves rolling dice. And I was like, yo, there's too many dice rolls here, is because they had to make a, air quotes, save environmental challenge on Troy's turn as the GM. And then Troy was ruling that on each player's turn to do something, they could roll whatever stat check they wanted.
Yeah, it just got totally
to
mixed
do
up.
what they were trying to do. Well, and we don't have a map to understand where we're going, which is a problem for another minute. So it just became, and it's not that any one of those things are wrong. It's that when you layer them into a sandwich, somehow we did I say this from a real life experience. Mom made 6 sandwiches for 6 different kids in the morning. And then at lunch, one of the kids has peanut butter and bologna.
Right.
Because the wrong halves of sandwich went together. This sandwich, it's not better for the sum of its parts. We lost some fidelity and it muddied also the ability for the players to make decisions at points.
Well, here's the problem, is that this is why initiative in Shadowdark is not to everyone's taste, but the reason that it works the way that it does is to get away from situations like this. Because if players are having to say, well, I want to do this, and it's the GM's turn, it just gets muddy. The way that I would have handled this if I was going to do it is, like you said, on each of the turns, I would have said, what are you doing to get out of the cavern? Here is where you are. Here's the context. What are you doing? The player tells me what they want to do, and then I adjudicate a single roll, and we work with the player. And that's the way the game is sort of designed mechanically to work. The reason I don't like these multiple die rolls, one on the GM's turn, one on the player's turn, is because you are ostensibly creating disadvantage. The more dice you roll in Shadowdark, because of how tight the tolerances are in terms of and again, like with grit, you can get advantage, yada, yada, yada. But like the more dice you roll, this is my argument against rolling dice all the time, especially in a high stakes situation like this, which I actually am not quite sure how high the stakes really were, because I don't know what the DCs were. I don't know the GM's list of like possible things that could happen.
Or how long before the tunnel
how many rounds do you have to get through?
The tunnel flooded.
Yes. We could have used a timer, index card RPG. Long story short, more transparency, I think we both agree on. The thing that I don't like about lots of die rolls is that you don't actually get very much for succeeding. You just don't have a bad thing happen to you. And then on your turn, you have to make a swimming check, or you have to make a strength check or whatever to actually get anywhere, which means you had to make 2 checks to do something, which essentially means that you have 2 opportunities to be set backwards and only 1 opportunity to move forwards. And so let's talk about Warwick taking a wrong turn, where he has to make a check on the GM's turn to avoid falling into a pit trap. But that was adjudicated on his turn. So he fails on the GM's turn, waits for his entire party to go, and on his turn, Warwick makes a check to make sure he doesn't fall into a pit trap and then takes his actual turn. I understand the need for drama and the want for dice rolling and stuff like that, but I want to point out one failure in particular, which I think was emblematic of what the issue here was, which was Pharaoh, Skid's character. Skid says, hey, can I make a wisdom check to try and remember something about what might be a good idea to do here? The purpose of this roll is to try and extract information out of the GM, which means the player doesn't have enough information to make decisions. And despite the fact that they all seemed like they were having a nice time, which I don't want to deny, and it was fun when I started to kind of pop the hood, which, like, we definitely won't be doing this all the time, but, like, you pop the hood on some of this stuff and you start to realize, like, boy howdy, there's a whole lot of not much happening. Because at the end of the episode, what happened is they covered some amount of, like, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 260 to 300 feet of territory, and it took 45 minutes and 21 die rolls.
Heard, and cannot argue that it got real muddy. As a listener, when Joe went off into the side tunnel and almost...
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Like, we're going to bounce around. I genuinely got confused about, as a listener, going, wait, what's happening to him? Where is he? Oh, he's actually separated. Why is he separated from the group? That's super dumb. Like, I mean, he's a fighter, but he's not, the character stats-wise is not dumb. In fact, he's pretty smart.
I think it was a random roll on a failure table.
Yeah, he took off on a wrong corner and got lost. Oh, that is interesting, but damn, I didn't really... I think to put my hat in the ring, because it feels unfair to critique something where, you know, if Troy would like to come on the show and defend himself, well, there's nothing to defend. Doing a great job. Love the show. Can't wait to listen to more. But I should say, like, how would I do it? I actually like I would also not have them rolling on the GM turn. They kept saying environmental challenge. I was like, I don't know if that's like a Pathfinder thing or a 5e-ish thing that is going on there. The lots of dice rolls, again, if we're going like leaning into the pulp environment, maybe. They were also out of caps. So as a GM, you do need to be aware of when that's the reality of every fail is a fail. So what would I have done is I would have had them roll on their own turn. I would have kept with that of, like, on your turn, you're going to have to make a roll and something is going to happen. Like, if you fail, there's a random set of things that can happen here. This is your movement rate. This is your movement rate, and you need to cover this much ground. And then the things that can happen are, because I like the random thing happening. Debris falls and hits you. You get separated from the group in the dark. You effectively, air quotes, lose a turn, right, of movement. So that set you back. You're now behind the group. You thought you were ahead. Now you're behind. Those are things that could happen. And there's a bunch of, you lose a piece of gear was a thing that happened that I thought was cool and interesting. Something washes away. And there were a lot of interesting things that could be happening and going, oh, on your turn, roll for the environmental effect. Oh, you succeeded. Okay, you duck and weave and you keep your wits about you and you move at half speed or whatever it's going to be, or double pace because you can double move. That's what you're doing. That's what we're doing here. And then it's very clear and you move forward. Yeah, I had a hard time with, like, Joe just, like, randomly being lost. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
It was cool that somebody got separated, but at the end of the day, it was like, oh, you lost a turn, come back. And he could have fallen in the sinkhole and Troy said, like, be washed away, which also would have sucked. Like, oh, I failed a roll and now I'm dead.
What this felt like is there wasn't a lot of opportunity for lateral thinking. Like the characters were along on a ride, and the ride they didn't really have very many choices to make. Like
and
what choices were you going to make?
And what I find happens when you put players in that situation is they start looking for very strange choices to make to solve problems.
Right.
And towards the end of the episode, right before they escape, not at the end of the episode, Matthew, playing Ellison the Wizard, asks, hey, the cave is flooding. Could I cast magic missile as a thrust, as a propulsion to bypass some amount of my swim check or my penalty on my strength? And there was a longer than for my taste should have been discussion. For me, this would have just been a like, no. And like just full stop, no. You can't, that's not how it works. And
interesting idea. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. And I wouldn't have felt weird about it. And it was one of those instances that let's dress up like goblins is kind of a catchphrase from our history. And it's letting that debate go on too long. And then somehow it starts gaining momentum because it's been talked about a bunch. No matter how much we talk about eating dirt as a lifestyle choice, it's still not a good idea. But the longer we talk about it, the more people start going, actually, and it gains momentum weirdly. And yeah, that to me was a symptom, not of Matthew being like, in fact, it was looking to do lateral thinking, that doing what a player should do. But it was in an environment where the game is just roll dice. And as somebody who likes rolling dice, it's a thing I try to be very careful of not creating those situations.
Right.
However, they made the rolls they needed to make.
Yep.
They got out of the tunnel. And with a bunch of unconscious NPCs. All the PCs were up and active, but the NPCs were kind of drowning, and we got into the weeds with swimming rules and holding breath rules. But when they get outside, I was kind of stoked on the fact that it was all the PCs are conscious and the NPCs are unconscious. You and I have talked a bunch about unconscious player characters is bad. It's just
we don't like it.
Well, you're not playing. You are now get to sit and watch the game until whenever we determine you are, because there are no rules of when they become conscious again, which the party debates. However, unconscious NPC is
it's an interesting conundrum.
Interesting problem to deal with. However, I think in terms of time and needing to check in with our sponsors, let's go ahead and put a pin in this for now and hear from our sponsors and come back and see what we can see.
Dungeon Master Diaries is brought to you by Tuber Eats. That's right. The Halfling meal delivery service is back to sponsor another episode. It's been a long day and you're tired. You've been crawling around in the dark, perhaps in a cavern, trying to escape a werewolf. You've been cheating death and discovering massive treasure hoards. Oh, if only. Do you really have time to cook? No, because you're out of rations. And hopefully you find a bunch of fish and a troll. Ha. Of course not. You don't have to, because Tuber Eats can deliver delicious second breakfast, lunch, or dinner. 11Zs notwithstanding. Right to your doorstep. Man, I bet these guys, the Glass Cannon podcast, wish they had Tuber Eats right about now. Tuber Eats is the best meal delivery service out there because they don't just deliver food, they make it fresh to order. Savory meat pies, honey cakes, roasted rooster, dumpling soup, you name it, they've got it. Get food delivered now, rations to your door or to your campsite with no minimum order. Did you smoke a little too much pipe leaf today and got a hankering for something tasty? Or are you carting around 5 extra NPCs? Well, just use the code DMD at checkout to get 10% off your first order. That's Tuber Eats, Tasty Eats, Hairy Feats.
All righty, let us bring this topic into the light with some takeaways, but we're going to change it up this time.
What?
Yeah, well, let's just generally talk about their campaign, man. I've been pretty effusive, hopefully, about we are fans. We enjoy it. I'm going to jump in, and we usually give it to the storyteller first. I'm just throwing window. It's just going out the window. You started with setting the context for this show.
Yeah.
And I just want to address right now, they are all caps, underlined, asterisks, exclamation points. They are playing Shadowdark as intended. it drives me nuts that I have seen so many comments going like, are they even playing Shadowdark? What are they even doing? It actually bothers me.
Yeah, it bothers me too.
Yes, they are. And I'll say there are times when their table is pretty darn close to both of ours in vibes and how things are going and resolutions and decisions. And I am enjoying it, and I am enjoying it because I feel like I am watching people play the game I love. So I wanted to start there, and then maybe a couple things to pick on, and then we'll do the positive sandwich.
Yeah, look, Jody, I also want to say, like, I was pretty critical. I will always be critical of gratuitous dice rolling. This is a long-standing theme on the program, and it's something that I just that just it rubs me the wrong way. So I didn't really want to do the dice rolling rant, but I do think that that all told, it is a sort of drop in a larger bucket of joy and enjoyment of the show. The one sort of thing that I also want to point out that I think is something that a lot of people coming to Shadowdark miss is XP pacing. There are so many things that I would highlight as being opportunities to give little shots of XP. I thought Saint Sydney has had 3 or 4 different moments of just like generally great lateral thinking, and if experience is the best way, which I think it is, to encourage particular player behaviors, encourage those player behaviors. I think, even if it's encouraging Joe to like think outside the rules, he tends to be like a very rules heavy and interested person. He's using grit and all these different ways of like trying to like couple the rules with the narrative and getting away from being very sort of rules centric. Award XP for those kinds of things. Award XP for the stuff that you want to see in the game. I know not everyone agrees with me on this, and to each their own, but I would love to see more experience and experience not just given for treasure.
I think that's a huge takeaway for me too, is the XP distribution. There's a couple different great videos out there. We'll get them into the show notes about thinking about Shadowdark's XP. And I have said a few times actually that in a book and system that is rightly, celebrated for its layout, the XP page in its layout actually sends the wrong message.
Yeah, it's not good.
Because the only thing that's shown in tables is for treasure. The rules, when you read the sentences, talk about XP that can be awarded for all kinds of things that have nothing to do with treasure. And I feel like one of the things I'm really enjoying about the show is watching another play group who's new to Shadowdark go through some of the same learning curves that I went through and some of the experiences I have and will continue to have. And then the joy of getting to watch somebody else play and learn. And I feel like the way XP is being doled out, I'm like, oh, that was why I did coins for XP way back when and immediately discarded the XP system of Shadowdark. And I'm glad I did that. And now on the other side, I'm going, oh no, we could be given XP for all kinds of things like the things you described. Now, the things you described to me sound an awful lot like luck tokens. And this is where I'll be a little critical. The cavalcade of luck tokens that is being used, the caps, it's a bit much for me, honestly. It's a little, the fire hydrant's a bit too turned up. I would like a little more restraint, a little tighter twist on the old spigot of luck. But that's my taste. That's because that gets us to the, oh my gosh, if I fail this roll, dun, 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 moments quicker. And I like those. And those are also me being mean and not having to worry about not killing a character every week, because who cares? Although I very rarely end up seeing characters die in my games, but still, yeah, the luck token economy. And man, this is a thing I can't say enough. How you choose as a GM to have luck tokens be involved in your game will drastically change the vibes of the game. And they are fast and furious at the Glass Cannon podcast table, and it's producing as expected results. Very heroic and crazy stuff going on. So
yep,
that's what you want. Do
especially
that.
Paired with the spellcasting mechanics or
yes.
spellcasting house rules for Sure. The thing that I want to kind of highlight at the end here, Jody, is that the thing that I am getting the most enjoyment out of, and knowing the Glass Cannon and being a fan of theirs for a long time and being a member of their subscription service for a long time, like the reason that I feel comfortable being reasonably critical is because I have been a fan of these folks for a long while, many years. And the thing that I love is watching them play an emergent narrative game with a rules light system, which I don't pretend to be the end all. I don't think that either of us hold this up as the pinnacle of all RPGs, which I think it has become some of the dialogue lately of like, this is the best way to play. Down with the adventure paths of Pathfinder. They are of yesteryear. Or what I find all that annoying. People who listen regularly will know that. What I think is great is watching them discover a different play style and be excited about it. And that makes me excited about it, despite the fact that like sometimes I don't agree with the way that Troy GMs the game. Who cares? Not my game. Interesting to think about, interesting to talk about on the show maybe one time, but we're certainly not going to just continue critiquing the Glass Cannon. What we're going to do is we're going to, on Thursday nights, sit down, or maybe later if we have, a meeting or something like that, real life getting in the way of watching the premieres, we're going to watch the Glass Cannon pod.
Can't wait to see what they get up to next. What story emerges from their narrative as they play the game? What could be better? What could be better? And being thankful that I have a moment to reflect on what one GM did, Troy, and then go, how can I take that into my game? And if maybe I do it a little different, cool. But maybe next time I got a cool dialogue where my voice gets louder or something. As the torchlight grows dim. No, that's too much. We hope you're able to find something useful in this episode that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you would like us to discuss in a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can also reach out via YouTube or Facebook, I guess. But best of all, get us in the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadowdark Discord channel. We are busy there. You can find links to those feeds and any other materials we reference in this episode's show notes. Until next time, may your taverns be light and your shadows be dark and your cannons be glass.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. And Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production. It's not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023. Jody,
up the joint. Jeez.
I would appreciate it if next time you would read the effing script.
Oh.